All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us for the sprint review for Sprint 15, which was our most recent sprint as part of the 4 sprint summer work cycle. So it's the third sprint of 4 in the summer. Um, so to review what has happened, I have the board up right now for all the tickets for this sprint.
Will you make that text a little bigger?
Sure.
Thank you.
Does that help? Is that
Yep.
better? Okay. So starting in the closed column, and actually maybe just for clarification, maybe I'll start with this document instead. So at the end of every sprint, we also do a blog post that outlines what the goals were for the sprint and what the accomplishments were. So maybe I'll start here to kind of refresh our memories of what we were intending to get done during this 2-week work cycle. So for Sprint 15, the first goal was to continue meetings with stakeholders to update them on the progress of Shoreline and to hear their thoughts about new features. And so that was completed. We met with folks from both UC Santa Barbara and UC San Diego and gathered their thoughts on priorities about various things with development and general comments about development. And so Amy and I will be meeting this afternoon to go through all of those cumulatively and kind of summarize that up. And today is the last day of the sprint, by the way. So we'll get that done this afternoon. So we'll have that the second bullet, review input from stakeholders at both campuses. We will at least have the review done by the end of today. And then that'll at least give us a sense of what the perspective is, and we'll share that back out. So any questions or comments on the first 2 bullets? Okay, and then the third bullet, diagram workflows at CU, Boulder, and Cornell following meetings with them. So we did meet with folks at both campuses and talked about how they go about ingesting their materials, because every institution does it differently. And so following those meetings, we were putting diagrams together so that we could graphically visualize what it looks like. And we did this previously for ourselves and for Berkeley. And so this time we did it for Boulder, and just realizing that I don't think we finished that for Cornell. I don't think a ticket was created. So we'll need to create a ticket to remember to create that one for Cornell. So we still need to do that work. And I don't know if I could quickly, let me see if I can quickly bring that up just so you can see what I'm talking about. I didn't think about having this open in advance. Buried way down here. So here's an example of, wow, what's that? Of Boulder, where, and I've created this and I've sent it to them. So we haven't gotten their feedback yet to know if I actually got it correct. So there may be errors here. But what they're doing is they created this AP this Python tool that's like a visual interface. It's a web-based interface that takes in the shapefile and it reprojects the shapefile, which it ingests that reprojected shapefile into GeoServer. And then they're reading the metadata directly from the shapefile XML. And the mods piece I need to get clarification on, because their main dams repo uses mods, and so I think they create mods for that, but they're not putting the object in that. So I need to get clarification on that, because they do ingest the zip file into a static web server as opposed to their dams. I'm not sure the relationship between mods and that. I need to get clarification on that, but somehow some of the mods is read back in. And then this interface that they've developed allows you to edit and add other metadata pieces. So you can kind of visualize it before the final file is created. So this is kind of cool, because this is one thing that we can't do right now, is have any sort of interaction during the process. And so a lot of the things that we can't get from the XML, Alex has written some code to go pull it from different places, and some of it is hard-coded in, which is fine for now, but eventually that's not going to work. But so then that whole process ends up with this GeoBlacklight JSON file that gets ingested, and then so their GeoBlacklight, just as ours, goes to GeoServer to get that derivative for display purposes and for downloading the derivative. But they actually have their data on a static web server, so that if you wanted to download the original, it can grab it from there. So that's an example of the diagrams where we've diagrammed that out for different campuses. Okay, any questions about that? So I'll be doing a diagram for Cornell as well. Okay, and then provide a high-level description of Shoreline. So Amy's working on this document. Did you want to say anything about that documentation, Amy?
I think it's really just about sort of what is the purpose of Shoreline at a high level, so that it can be shared really with higher ups within the library to understand the value and the purpose of Shoreline as it relates to library digital products. That's really it. So it's meant to be a very short overview, but that's what that is, and that'll be available for review.
Okay, great. The next one is to determine who at UC Santa Barbara and UC San Diego will create graphics for the geodata interface. There are various aspects. If I could just quickly pull up Santa Barbara. So right now, say for instance in Santa Barbara, this is just drawing upon the basic UC Santa Barbara look and feel. So there's nothing here that indicates the library. There's nothing here that indicates geodata. And then this is also the UC Santa Barbara library. This is like an older version of the footer. And so at some point we will need to have, some library branding, some geodata branding, and this bottom footer needs to match our other library branding. And then the other piece of this is when you see the results here, this middle blank space, there should be an icon there indicating what campus the data belongs to. So if my Zoom tools are always in the way of what I'm trying to do here. So if I go to Stanford's, for example, you can see that this middle icon is for the campus. So these are Stanford, that's Tufts, this is MIT, the different campuses, the different institutions here. And so we don't have that little icon yet. So we'd like to have that little icon. And that's really important when we start sharing data, and when we have, I was going back to, where'd it go? Oh, I closed it. Okay. so right now, if it's only our data, that's not a big deal. But when we start putting data from other campuses, and especially I think the first thing we would do is share data between Santa Barbara and San Diego. And so, before we can do that, it would be good to have that icon. So we've determined who we're going to be talking to do that work. So then the next steps will be to actually figure out what those graphics look like and have that implemented. And so, and just to mention what's happening at Santa Barbara is this has kind of triggered conversations about what the common look and feel amongst all Surfliner products would look like, and how that ties in with the library. When the library, I guess the library still needs to update its website to correspond with the campus's most recent graphics versions. And so so what we're hoping to do is come up with a style where that if you're on the GeoData page, it has that very common look and feel, so that it's the same as if you're on our Starlight page, or whatever digital library you're on. The basic common look and feel is the same, so it feels like it's all the same product, even if the interfaces are different. So yeah, so we're going to be talking to our folks to see what that would look like, and mock that up, and share that out.
Yeah, and San Diego's in the same. We've started conversations about what those icons and sort of distinguishing features would look for our site, and also starting to have the conversations about the overall look and feel. So, yep.
All right. Then the next thing was to create short-term workflows for ingesting data and metadata into the campus instances. And so, for instance, I've got a set now of 9 additional files that are ready to go right at the moment. And so we're trying to figure out how, where I can put those, that the developers can get access to them, and that they know that there's something that needs to be ingested, how that whole conversation happens, how the QC process happens. And again, this is short term, because the long-term goal is to have some system where this is something that I could just do, and I wouldn't have to involve the developers. But because that's going to take a while to develop, we need to have this short-term solution. And not just, oh, hey, Alex, I've got this stuff, can you ingest it for me? To actually have something that's documented and something we have a little more control over. And so here at Santa Barbara, what we've done is created a GitLab repository within the DLD, the Digital Library Development Group's workspace. But we're still trying to figure out exactly how it all happens, because the data sets are large, and normally when you're doing this kind of work, you're passing metadata along, and the data just sits somewhere in some file. And so because the metadata and the data is all packaged together, it's not like we can pass metadata through this process. And so at this point, I think what it is we're going to have a board kind of like, in fact, do I have it still open? Yeah, it's blank at the moment. I'll be putting the first ticket in here. But basically, you would create a ticket, and it would have a link to Box, for example, and we would put all the files in Box. And then that ticket would go to ingest to stage, and then whatever trigger happens, the developer would ingest it in the stage, move the ticket over. Then I would do my QA process, move the ticket over, and then they would ingest it into production. So we're still working out the details of how that goes. But that's roughly where we are at the moment. So we can at least just get stuff in. Any questions about that?
What's happening on the UCSD side? Or
So we have a temporary workflow, but what we need to do is flush it out more. So right now, Thor and I had just talked about using UCSD staging folder, but it's the transition of how do we know once he's ingested stuff to be able to QC it and then pass it over. So we still need to flush out some of those short-term details, but that right now is what it's looking like, is we'll just communicate back and forth. But I think seeing this board that UC Santa Barbara has set up is actually informative, and we'll actually be able to better track things moving forward. So we might look at borrowing some of that.
yeah, thank you.
All right, and then the last bullet, do preliminary work in preparation for adding right statements to the object record page metadata. So if I go back to Earthworks, they have this use and reproduction field that has any sorts of right statements that need to be passed along to the user. We'd like to implement that here, especially because I have a lot of data that is ready to ingest, but we can't ingest it yet because it has a use restriction. We don't have any way right now of getting that information to the user because they're only able to download this derivative. And so they don't really get any sort of trigger that there's some sort of use condition. It's not a restriction as much as just, you know, like say a warning message that, you know, a lot of, like say a county data where it's parcel data or something like that, and the county wants to make sure that the users understand that, you know, the county's not responsible or you know, those types of things, and we want to be able to have that information up front so people can see that. And so that should be pretty easy to do. We just need to do some preliminary work to figure out, you know, what exactly this is going to say, if we're going to match Stanford or what, and then where in the metadata this gets pulled from so that they can update the ingest code to display that, or to pull this information and then update to the you know, this page to be able to display it. So we just started doing that work, and then hopefully in the next sprint we will be completing that work, and then that will free up a whole bunch of more data that we can ingest. Any questions about that?
Yeah, more a comment. I think it's really important, I think, to continue stressing the ingest workflows. One of the concluding lessons from the first ADL was that requiring developers to ingest data into a digital library system is a huge mistake, that's where our first digital library system was left when I arrived 10 years ago, and nobody had been able to ingest any new data into the existing system at the time because the developers had left, because the grants had run out, and none of the remaining IT staff and none of the remaining library staff knew how to operate the system anymore. So you're having more than one person in the organization who knows how to ingest the data into the system is really, really crucial.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, otherwise in 3 years, the admin will just make us turn it off.
Yeah, exactly.
Like just delete that shit. It hasn't been updated. Nobody knows how to do it. It's useless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in our case, because the digital library groups want to develop an actual dams or some sort of, you know, asset management system, until that is part of that definition of what that system looks like, which we're calling Comet as our internal name, we're not sure how much of that ingest actually falls within the Shoreline scope and how much falls into the Comet scope. And so we're waiting for a white paper that that Tom Johnson is primarily writing as the start of scoping Comet, and then The next thing is, and we now have a product owner for Comet, and so when she can get the project up and running, the October-November work cycle should be requirements gathering for it, and at that point we should have a pretty good idea of how much of this falls within Comet. That's that project's purview to create, and how much falls within Shoreline. But simultaneously, what we're doing on our side within Shoreline is investigating all these other institutions and how they're doing their ingests. And we're going to be presenting to the Geo Blacklight community. They meet once a month, and present it to the community and have conversations within the community. Because there's been some talk about interest about developing an ingest tool, on a community level, because a bunch of institutions are having the same thing.
Yeah, for a long time, everyone's having the same issue. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's definitely there's a lot of interest. So it will get done one way or the other, but in order to be done right, it's going to take some time. And so I'm guessing it's probably going to be at least a year before we're going to have something like that. And so we want to make sure that whatever process we have for ingesting data now, where the developers have to be involved, is we make that as simple and documented and clear cut as possible.
Yeah, that's really important.
Yeah, so multiple people can pull the trigger on that, and it's not just relying on one person to know what to do. So yeah, so that's what we're trying to do. So I am just about out of time, but that pretty much summarizes what we've been doing. Let me get back to the board. It's here somewhere. Here it is. So tomorrow we start the next sprint, and anything that has not been completed during this sprint gets folded over to the next sprint. And there are also some tickets in here we haven't gotten to, but a lot of it was like, as we're having these conversations, we throw new tickets in here that trigger work for next time. And so those will be folded in as well. Things we'll be focusing on next are, having some way to QC, like a more efficient way of QCing the metadata during ingest. We have a couple tickets here for that rights fields work, what needs to be done there. Right now, when you download things, you click on that button to export, and the message that comes up that actually tells you your download is ready is way up at the top. And if you're scrolled down the screen, you don't even see that. And so you have absolutely no idea that that download is available. This is a system-wide, Geo Blacklight-wide thing. And so, we could do something locally, but we'd also want to talk to the community at large to see, if they want to do, something at the community level about that. Little thing, the geodata footer at UC Santa Barbara doesn't match, so that would need to be updated. And then documenting the architecture. So again, so folks know. So that's it. Thank you for joining us. Any last comments or questions? All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us for this sprint review, and we will see you in 2 weeks for our last sprint review of the work cycle. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.